Hey guys, it's Cheryl from Woodshop Diaries, and a couple years ago I shared how I built these cabinets for my mudroom. Now, truth be told, when I put these in, neither I nor Danny ever really loved them. Danny hated the green paint, but he liked the overall design. I love the green paint, but the overall design just didn't really work for our day-to-day use. Over the years, I've figured out that we don't actually need or use any of this storage space, except that Danny does have like 2 coats in this cabinet. This bench, no one ever sits on it, and it's just kind of a pain to vacuum under. And this hallway just feels really dark because this upper cabinet just casts a shadow on like half the wall. So after living with this for a while, I think we have a better idea of what we actually want here, and it's something much simpler than this. Danny's only request, well, he had 2 requests: no green paint, and he just wanted somewhere that he could store his like 2 coats that was hidden behind doors. So in this video, I'm not tearing this out just yet, but I am going to share how I built Danny the coat closet cabinet that will be replacing these 2 tall cabinets in our new mudroom design. So if you're ready to build part 1 of the new mudroom, let's head to the shop. This video was sponsored by Ugreen. I mentioned that Danny said no more green for this new mudroom, so we both decided to go with wood tones to keep things lighter. I opted to build this cabinet from red oak, and I'm not usually a fan of red oak because I don't particularly like the wood grain, but I do love the color when it's stained. So I started by cutting down some 3/4 inch red oak plywood to build the cabinet box from. I ripped the sheet into 3 strips, and I cut 2 of them for the tall sides and then 1 of them for the top and bottom panel. Then I ripped a thin strip to use as a top support. I drilled pocket holes into the ends of my top support and the top and bottom panels, then I assembled the box using pocket hole screws. The top support goes directly under the top panel, and this is what I'll use to secure it to the wall studs when installing it. I installed the bottom panel about 6 inches up from the bottom of each side because I plan on adding some trim on the front later. Now I need to add the back panel. I could have just stapled 1/4 inch plywood onto the back, but since I was staining, I would see the exposed plywood edges. So as much as I hate the router, I decided to pull it out to route a rabbet into the back of the cabinet to recess the back panel into. But before I could move on, I had to stop and empty my camera's SD card. This may have never crossed your mind when watching these videos, but one of the most annoying parts of filming is having to pause work to empty the SD card. One of the other most annoying parts about filming all of these projects is finding a place to store all this footage, so I recently set up a Ugreen NAS DH4300 Plus to help with that. Now, just to be clear, I am not a techie type person. I didn't even know what a NAS was until just a few months ago, so I'm going to keep this very simple. If you're not familiar, a NAS is a network attached storage device, so you can think of it as kind of like a really big hard drive that's connected to the network, kind of like the cloud, only without the expensive monthly charges. You can use it to access all your files from your computer or your phone without taking up all of the storage space on your device. This NAS DH4300 Plus has 4 bays. Each bay can house a hard drive for a total of up to 120 terabytes of storage, which is like 41 million photos or 80,000 videos, which is crazy. One of the great things about the Ugreen NAS is that it's compatible with a wide range of third-party hard drives. So you can choose your preferred brand or likely use your existing ones if you already have some. Basically, you just pop the hard drives into the bays and begin the setup. Since NAS is so new to me, I was really worried that the setup was going to be super complicated. But I just plugged in the power and Ethernet to my router, downloaded the app, and then walked through the steps in just a few minutes. The hardest part was actually trying to decide how I want to set up my hard drives. Since there are 4 hard drives, I can choose to set all of them up for storage, or I can choose to use some of them as backups. For example, I may choose to store my files on 2 of my drives and then use the other 2 as basically copies. That way, if one drive goes bad, I have an exact copy of that drive as a backup. This is called RAID 1. There are multiple RAID options available, and you can always change them later in your settings. But once I figured out how I wanted to set up my drives, I allowed it to initialize everything, then it was ready to start using. I figured it would be kind of interesting to see how quick one of my larger video files takes to move over, since that's what I'm usually working with and waiting on. So this file from my SD card is roughly 3 gigabytes. I just uploaded it to the NAS in about 5 minutes. It's taking about 7 minutes to upload that same file to my OneDrive, so every minute that I'm saving moving files faster to the NAS is another minute I can actually spend working in my shop. You can also set up various users, so if you have employees or just multiple people in your house using this for storage, each user can have their own account with their own secure storage, so everyone can keep their own files organized or share files easily. The Ugreen NAS also has a built-in AI smart recognition feature in the Photos app. It can intelligently identify albums of specific people, places, animals, etc. As a content creator, I do most of my editing on my computer, but I do most of my posting from my phone. So I love that I can access all of my files from my daily devices like my laptop and my phone and even my TV. Plus, I have peace of mind that these files are stored locally and securely. If you're interested in a better storage solution for your files and photos, check the link in the description and use the code to get 20% off a Ugreen NAS. With a fresh SD card for the camera, I moved on to cutting the 1/4-inch plywood piece for the back panel of this cabinet. Because the router left rounded corners in the rabbet, I either needed to chisel the corners square or cut the panel corners round. I figured it would be a lot easier to just cut the corners round, so I traced the dowel at each corner and used a jigsaw to cut them. Of course, the back panel didn't fit the first time, so I ended up having to come back and shave a little off the sides and try again. But that happens. Once it fit into the rabbets, I secured it with staples. Then I started building the face frame. I cut the face frame pieces from 1x2s and I drilled pocket holes to assemble. I've mentioned this several times before, but for thinner pieces like these 1x2s, I like to use the Craig Micro pocket hole jig with smaller pinhead screws, just because they're a little bit less likely to split. But a standard size pocket hole jig can definitely work fine if you're careful. After I test fit the face frame would in fact fit the cabinet, I glued and brad nailed it onto the front. Then I moved on to building the doors. I wanted this cabinet to have double doors, so I cut 1x3 pieces to make 2 identical door frames. Then I assembled them using wood glue and dowels. Okay, so I have my door frame here. The other one's in the floor. So for the inside panels here, I was gonna use 1/4-inch plywood, and I was going to, just like I did on the back of the cabinet, I was gonna use a router and a rabbeting bit to just like rabbet this out. But I remembered I still have a bunch of this trim left over from all the fluted vanity projects that I've built. And I measured, and I have enough of this to line the inside of both sections of both doors. So if I put this on the inside of the door, like this, then there's enough room on the back side, back here, to put the plywood panel. So that way I wouldn't have to router anything, and I would have an additional decorative trim, like on the front. I carefully cut this trim to line the insides of the opening of each door frame, and then I glued them flush to the front edge. I had this trim left over from a few previous projects where I'd used some fluted boards, so it's kind of a unique piece. But you could do this same thing with pretty much any kind of decorative molding or trim that was up to a 1/2 inch thick. So 1/2 inch square dowels would work great. After the trim was glued around the openings, I cut to fit 1/4-inch plywood panels to fit and then glued them onto the trim. Of course, if you didn't want to use trim on these door frames, you could definitely just use a router to cut the rabbet to install these plywood panels into as well. While the glue dried on the doors, I moved back to the inside of the cabinet and I cut a shelf and some shelf supports that I can hang my hooks on. After edge banding, I screwed a support piece onto each side of the cabinet 3/4 inch from the back panel. Then I slid a piece of 3/4 inch plywood behind them to attach to the back. So I should have thought to install this before putting on the back, but I didn't. So I'm going to screw it in at the corners through the back panel. So it'll go through the back panel, through this backboard, and then into these side pieces. Not a big deal, just probably should have done that earlier. So now this board is secured to these. And now I need to add the shelf. Then I placed the shelf on the supports and just brad nailed it to secure. Before finish, I needed to add just 2 more pieces, trim at the top and at the bottom. I opted to install crown molding around the top, so I just cut to fit, then glued and nailed 3 pieces around the sides and the front. For the bottom, I simply glued a piece of 1x6 along the front. Now I considered using like a baseboard trim and wrapping it around all 3 sides here, but I decided to leave the sides flush. When I install it in my mudroom later, I can simply butt the existing baseboard to the sides of this cabinet versus having to tie all the baseboard pieces together. And at that point, it was ready for a coat of stain. I used Minwax weathered oak stain. It's my favorite color on red oak. Then I applied 3 coats of Minwax Polycrylic to seal it. Between stain and poly, I went ahead and drilled concealed hinge cup holes along both doors. After the clear coat had dried, I installed face frame overlay hinges to the doors. Then I hung the doors onto the cabinet. I recently shared a detailed video on installing concealed hinges, so if you want to learn more, I will link that video below. After hanging the doors and adjusting the hinges, I decided to add some magnetic catches to help hold them closed. One of my doors was slightly bowed, so this just helped hold it flat. Then I added some simple door pulls. And finally, some hooks to be able to hang the coats inside. And with that, this cabinet is ready to go into my new mudroom. I've got to demo the existing mudroom first, but when I move this in, I'll secure it to the wall studs through the top support. I love that this cabinet has storage for accessories up top, shoes at the bottom, and plenty of coat and hat storage in the middle. I'm really excited to get this moved inside. I'll be sharing this cabinet installed, what else I'm adding to the new mudroom, and the completed space in my next video, so be sure to stay tuned for that coming very soon. In the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching and following along on all of my crazy projects. I truly hope they inspire some of your own. So until next time, friends, happy building.